actually, this is Pierce. I work at a company called GitHub. They are a place where it's kind of like maybe like a social network type of thing, but for code. So if you want to be able to share your code with other people, then you would put your code up to GitHub, and anybody can come and add to the code, fork it, which means like to take a copy and change it in any way that they want, and just kind of help build things together. So lots of companies use it internally just to work together on code. So yeah, that's the idea of it. I've been at GitHub for about a year now. In general, I've been in tech for about 3 years, and before I was in tech, I had a career in sales, and so I actually worked at a tech recruiting company as well. So.
I'm Amy Hendricks. I work at Spoonflower. Spoonflower is a Durham-based startup. We have we do custom fabric printing and also have a very, very large design marketplace for people who design things like fabric and wallpaper and gift wrap and generally surface design things to be able to sell their work and create community around their work, or for that matter also like get a picture of your cat printed on fabric to use to make a pillow if you just want to do it for yourself. It's a very cool company. We really like sort of focusing on creativity and empowering people's creativity. The company's been around for about 10 years. I have been there for a little under 3 years, 3 years and a couple of weeks. I've been in technology for more like 15 years. I started as a web developer back in the good old days when you taught yourself from a book because the web looked kind of cool. I'm intensely jealous of all of you who have things like code schools and so on available to you, because I remember what it was like to come up when we didn't have those things. Before I was in technology, I sold books.
I'm Emily Stamey. I work for a company called Conquest. We're based out of DC. I'm a remote worker and work here in North Carolina. I'm the only employee in North Carolina. Our product is for network security monitoring and threat assessment. It analyzes network traffic and figures out how threatening certain attachments and files might be to help people in the SOC figure out what might be happening on their network and try to contain it. I work on the interface that people use to see reports and information about that analysis. And I started in the 90s. I was at State in the era of the .com boom, so I spent a lot of my college off time getting co-ops at local tech companies, and I've just been kind of, I don't know. I've been around for a while, but mostly working in small groups.
I'm Erin. I work at AdWorks, which is right here in the ATC. I've been there for 2 years, a little over 2 years. It was 2 years in November. I was at a little small startup before that, but I actually went to code school when it was the Iron Yard. It'll be almost 4 years this year, so that's cool. I didn't have a career before then. I was kind of, before learning about the Iron Yard, I was going through community college with hopes to do an eventual CS degree, with hopes to eventually become a computer science major, which is, I was just thinking today, at the time I started code school, that career path was 4 years out. Like that was like the completion of that degree was like 4 years out. So that's an interesting point to be at, like 4 years later from that point. So yeah.
Well, did you go to school to get a CS degree, or did you get a different type of degree, or how did you get it?
I didn't come to State for computer science. I came for aerospace engineering, but there were a lot of political changes at the time that made that a lot less easy to get a job without a PhD. And I didn't really want to be in school that long, and I was spending all my time in the computer lab, so that's what I switched to pretty early on, luckily before I got too far into that engineering curriculum. But yeah, but I liked web development a lot, and there were not a lot of resources for that, so it was a lot of figure it out as you go. They weren't teaching that at school.
Right. A lot of time. So is your day like sitting behind a computer all day, or do you have other things that take up a decent amount of your time? What does the day look like? Any of you should feel free to popcorn in on that one.
I can start. I think an ideal day might look like coding all day. I don't know if everybody shares this. Like that sounds really dreamy. I think a lot of time it ends up. I think one of the things that surprised me most about my working in a coding job was that I spend almost as much time reading other people's code as I do writing my own. So that's a really interesting. The focus involved for me is a lot greater to read somebody else's code and rather than write my own. So that's an interesting aspect of the job that is, while it's fun, it's definitely kind of more unexpected time allotment. And I would say also a lot of time collaborating with people, especially I'm currently doing a lot of front-end design, which is the stuff that when you interact with a website, that's stuff you're directly interacting with in the way that a website looks. So a lot of time spent with designers and that sort of, communication between a few different people, between what, product, says they would like this thing and a designer says it should look like this. So a lot of back and forth between
as well, but coding is very rarely actually typing. And for me, like you said, I spent a lot of time reading other people's code, but then I also spent a lot of time, just thinking about how you want something to behave, because, you might get a general kind of task like users should be able to sign into this website. Okay, that's, kind of a general thing, but when they have the wrong password, what kind of message should they get there? How should this whole flow work? And so I kind of just spent a lot of time thinking about those things and trying to imagine how the user might interact with the website. And then I spent a good portion of my time writing tests to then be able to know when I'm done. So, I write a lot of tests to be able to say, okay, once those tests pass, then I know the user will be able to do the thing that I want them to do. So.
I find that if I don't ask the questions ahead of time when I first get assigned a task to do, if I'm not asking some questions leading up to it, most of the time I implement something that was ill-informed or just kind of a snap judgment of what I think they're asking for. If I ask a lot more questions up front, I tend to spend a lot less wasted time on actually writing the code, going back and changing it to fix my mistake. And I guess to speak a little bit to the working remotely, I work a lot better in the morning with code. I have a lot better focus. So I try to time my bigger development tasks in the morning. If I can plan ahead, knowing what issues I'm going to tackle in the evening or afternoon before, and know what it is I'm going to take on in the morning, then I can really get a lot accomplished really quickly. And then my teammates, a large portion of them are in Austin, so they tend to get up later. So when they start getting fired up and start being really chatty, by then I've already gotten quite a bit done, which is really, really helpful.
Companies where you work remote, right?
Yes.
Is working remote something that you really like? And how do you communicate with people when you have to work far away from all of them?
Yeah, I really like working remotely, but it's definitely going to be kind of dependent on your personality. There's never going to be as much social interaction as there is if you're in an office all day, right? So some people hate working remotely. They can't stand to just be in their home all day by themselves. And you do have, for us, we communicate with Slack, which is a messaging service. And so I get the interaction that way, but it's all on the internet. All my friends are on the internet. None of them are in real life, so it's definitely different. And then it's really up to you to design a schedule that works for you. It's very easy when you're working remote to end up kind of working, kind of never working and always working at the same time, because you're not on top of yourself, you're not sticking to a schedule, so then you kind of, end up doing laundry or whatever in the middle of the day, and then at 9 p.m. at night you're working because you weren't doing it earlier. So that's definitely an aspect of working remotely that I have to be prepared for, but I personally love it, and I think it's, if you have a company that has a good remote culture, then it works out really well. Some companies, you know, they might say, oh, you can work remotely, but you're the only employee that's working remotely, and everyone else is in some central office somewhere. That usually doesn't work out really well, because then you have kind of no support. Everyone's making the decisions and talking and pairing and like coding together in the office, and you're in your own little world. Luckily for me, most of my company is remote and my entire team is remote, so I'm not missing out on anything by also being remote. All the conversations are happening online, and I know if I need to work with somebody else to solve a problem, like we can jump on a screen share and do that.
So, what skills do you think are most important, or have helped you the most in your job as a software developer or in tech in general?
I would say networking, because
Do you mean computer networking or social
Yeah.
networking?
socially networking, because it is incredibly important for an industry that tries to describe itself as being very antisocial. Networking has been the main way that I've been able to get jobs. Going in cold through interviews has never worked for me. I've never gotten a job that way. So networking has been really, really important for finding work, for getting support, having those people that I can reach out to with my dumb questions so that I don't seem dumb to my coworkers. Having that network is really, really helpful.
Have any of you ever looked back at older code in your at work and thought, who wrote this? And then seeing it was you? I've done that for sure. Like, who is this jerk?
And I apologize for it.
For sure. I mean,
Someone says, what is this thing that you wrote? And I'm like, oh God, I'm so sorry.
what is it about tech and that, like, what drew you to it? What was it true? Like, what do you like the most about doing it? Why do you do this instead of whatever else that you might have done? Emily has a great answer. I can tell because she's just giggling over there.
So I still have a backup plan. but for now, I still really like it, and I really liked communicating on the internet. I really liked. I felt like I was in a small town where, just felt like really like enclosed. And so I started playing on BBSs. I liked those a lot. Got on the internet when I came to college. It was so fast. And had this really awesome modem. But it was a lot of communication and connecting with people was what I really, really liked. And I liked being able to find information. At the time, people would just like throw up a website about something they were interested in. They would share all these links and they would do all this research, and there's just all this neat stuff that you could find. I could connect with artists, musicians and stuff. And I could actually send them an email on the internet at the time. I could find my former high school classmates on the internet and just like reach out to them. And it was just really powerful and engaging. So I started maintaining a bunch of different websites and learning a lot about building them, supporting them, and then as soon as they became dynamic, I was really hooked on it.
What's your backup plan?
It's a farm.
What sort of skills or training or background do you feel helped in your transition from whatever you used to do into development?
Yeah, so I went to the Iron Yard, which was a code school, and now we're here at Momentum. And so to me that was huge because I had tried to learn before on my own, and you totally can learn on your own. Like, you don't have to go to code school, you can learn from books, you don't need a degree. So many people have learned on their own, but the thing about that is it takes almost superhuman levels of dedication to be able to put the time in that you need to be able to put it in, and be able to go to meetups and network and do everything like that. And I just had to be honest with myself and say, I'm not going to do that on my own. Like, I couldn't do it. So to me, like, it was huge to be able to get into an environment, and more than the actual like learning of the subjects that happened at the code school, to me it was about being with like like-minded people that were also trying to do this thing and learning like the ins and outs and the kind of like jargon of the industry to be able to like when I went to meetups to then felt like I belonged there and like I fit in and everything. So that to me was huge, was just having that like network of people that were all kind of on the same page together.
To kind of just piggyback off that code school experience, I'll lean over this way. I thought, I ended up getting my first job out of code school was in a technology that I didn't really learn much in code school at all. So for me, like that, what I kind of pulled away from code school is the general, like, you're hyper learning in this hyper learning state for 12 weeks, but then after that, you're still in a hyper learning state for, it slows down at some point, we're still all learning all the time, but you know, that first like several months to maybe even a year of your first job, you're still in that hyper learning state. So just like the kind of the things that I pulled out of that education was that kind of mentality of like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, but I need to figure it out sort of thing. And some of the tooling, so it's like a little things like learning how to use GitHub. Like there are tools that are exactly, that I used in code school exactly as I used them in my first job. So just having that sort of, these little things to hold on to is like, okay, I know how to do this, that's the same, and so maybe this is the same, maybe this is the same. So that kind of common ground or whatever, if that makes sense.
I think getting in the habit of, I have an idea or I have a problem or I have something I need to solve, I'm going to dig in and try to make it, was really huge. And everyone's got a different background, everyone's got a different way of learning, so I can't really speak for anyone but me on this, but before I sort of got into the whole code thing, I was very much of the habit of like, here's an interesting thing, I'm going to read something about it. And as much as I said earlier in my introduction that I learned from books, that's because that was the only option there was at the time. There were not like, you know, tons of resources other than that. I now use them to like, there's a broken leg on my red room sofa and it's got like a stack of HTML books from the 90s underneath it. Right? The way that you really learn this stuff is to dig in and start making things. You know, and if they're real things, even if they're little tiny things, but they're things you can actually show to someone and share with someone, then it's got a little bit more stakes to it. But even if it's just, I've heard about this technique or this way of doing things, I want to just kind of mess around and tinker with it and see how it works and get hands-on with it, that's incredibly important. It's stepping away from just sort of passively, I want to know about this, into I want to really get my hands dirty with this. And from there, kind of making that a real priority in like how you approach whatever problems you come up with.
Amy, what was the first thing you built on the web?
I want to say it was a personal homepage on I was no longer in graduate school, but I still had access to my account on the university's internet, and it had web space on it. It had like a little, you know, tilde, a squiggly line in front of my username, and it had, you know, it had a picture of my dog and links to my favorite places. And you were talking about like the really, really early days of the web, and like that gave me such nostalgia for those sort of like homepage of my favorite links.
Yeah, it's all the favorite places you like to go.
Yeah.
Made it super easy to jump around, basically be your bookmarks now, but with a picture.
Yeah, there's definitely, I think, a generational thing of like, who had to hook to a telephone line, get on the internet, or who remembers when there wasn't an internet? I remember when I was like, that doesn't make sense. But that's great.
So on that note, you know, things have changed a lot over time. Like, what is the biggest change that you've seen in your career so far? I realize that we're all at sort of different stages in our careers, but
I would say just even in the short 3 years that I've been in there, I think, we're all seeing it now with like the whole Facebook, Cambridge Analytica thing, if you've heard about that scandal, but there's a lot more acknowledgement into the responsibility that developers have. We have a tremendous amount of power to build anything, but that doesn't necessarily mean we should. And I think there's a lot more like acknowledgement of that now, and kind of conversation around like the personal responsibility that you have as software developers to not build things that are harmful. So
I'll throw mine out there just because it strikes me so much on this question. The level of collaboration. When I first started, and I've been a software developer for about 20 years, most of what I did was me sitting at a desk by myself, never seeing anyone, sort of troll-like. And now I can't imagine going through a day without working with 4 or 5 other people, which is cool.
And that almost applies to the code itself and the sites that we build.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
not just, I have a whole team that I work with, whereas I once upon a time spent entire days in my study and never emerged. But the things that we do, and this is gonna be a really, really vague answer to anybody who's not already immersed in this world, and I apologize. But it's no longer, I have this page or this site that I built, and it's all sort of nice and self-contained, and it just kind of lives within itself, and maybe it links to something else, and when you click on that link, you go to that other place. The way that we build code involves a huge amount of incorporating code from other people, data from other places, working with tools that exist online, like at GitHub. Again, couldn't live without it. A lot of times, where I worked, we're an e-commerce business for like 10 years. You would go to our site and order some stuff and we would send it to you. And increasingly, we now have, things that we sell or produce that are, sell and produce that are sold through, you might see it on Amazon, you might see it on eBay, you might see it on Etsy, and figuring out, there's a lot of software engineering that goes into how do we interface with those services to push those things out and to pull data in. And it's much more distributed, not just in terms of the way that we collaborate with people, but the way that the things that we build are now kind of distributed in different places and interact with a lot of different things, and are not just, this is my site that kind of lives in this folder of files and just stays there.
Question. What's the hardest thing for you about working in tech? Like what don't you like? What do you wish you could change?
So my company is based in San Francisco, and so if you've seen the show Silicon Valley, like my company is nothing like that, thank God. But there's a perception of like tech workers in the tech industry that can in some ways be true. And to me, that's like the hardest thing about working with tech. There's a lot of really intelligent people that then you have to remind them that just because they're intelligent in this one area doesn't mean they know everything. It doesn't mean they can, if you're a really good developer, it doesn't mean you should be a salesperson or a project manager or, like there are so many different areas. And so I think that can be an issue, just like the, the stereotype of the field, but also the ways in which that stereotype is in some ways true. There can be some egos.
That's a great answer. I was racking my brain about that, and I think that the things that I wish would change, I think, is exactly that. Is like some things, especially some newer technologies, like kind of come with a stigma sometimes, like the blockchain, Bitcoin kind of phenomenon has that just a lot of baggage to it when I think about it. Like I think some people, especially if they've been in the industry for a long time or are very good in their specific fields, can kind of put off an intimidating vibe.
I think I've been lucky to kind of surround myself with a nice like little collaborative bubble where I don't really experience that on a day-to-day basis, but definitely crosses my mind when I think about switching to a new company and worrying about encountering something like that. But
You're building tools for people and you're working with other people to build those tools. So there's a lot of collaboration that should be happening, and there has been traditionally an idea that you don't really need to collaborate. There was the time where I was the lone web developer and I was just kind of in a corner, and I worked mostly with marketing people or other people doing work, but I was just presenting that work across the internet. And so there was definitely that era where you were kind of tucked in the corner and not really working in a team. So I like being more in the team space. But sometimes the collaborative nature, that spirit isn't with everybody. And that is the one thing that I struggle with, dealing with people who can be dismissive when learning is happening is really frustrating, and that's where like finding that really good network is really helpful. Finding those people that you can talk to, that no question is a dumb question, and making sure that you can learn, because when you get in that pattern of interacting with people who dismiss you for not knowing something in a space that is gigantic, the tech industry is huge and there's so much to learn. There's no way a single person could know it all. In that space, to not be accepting and open of someone having a simple question is pretty ridiculous. And so navigating the internet as a source of information, but also recognizing the spaces that it's maybe not as fun for me to learn. I would hold shots of the internet completely as if they don't exist, because they don't foster my learning and growth. So I just don't go there. But if you're on your own and that is the space that you're trying to learn, and you're recognizing this kind of pushback against you, try somewhere different. Because there are a lot of really great places that you can ask questions, that you can get support, and that you can learn. And go there, because the other places just aren't worth it.
And to kind of piggyback off that, with the whole learning aspect, I would say one other thing that can be really difficult about tech is that you're often expected to do things outside of your day job. Like, you might code for your company, you have that code, but a lot of people want to see, for example, open source contributions, which are typically, that's typically not code that's for your company. It's just free code out on the internet. So you're doing that in your spare time, or sometimes people want to see people like giving talks, or just in other ways, like in their coding community, and a lot of that is not, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. That's outside of your regular working hours. So that can be really tough. I think there are a lot of companies, for me, the way I've gotten around that is I've been lucky that I've worked for companies that allow me to contribute to open source during work hours. They allow me to give talks and have it be like a paid company trip. And so these things that are improving my resume and that, future employers will be looking for, I'm able to do that on company time, but not everybody is. And so I think that can be a really tough thing if you're at a job that won't allow you to do any of that on company time, then you're doing that nights and weekends or whatever. So there are companies that let you, so I would definitely encourage people to do one of those, but yeah, that can be a big issue.
And I think there are some companies who don't necessarily are looking for that sort of thing, which I like. I think that's something, a negative that I would cite, is that the companies that expect you to not only work a full-time job, but also have a side project, right? I think that's really great for some people, but some people can be great developers and have children. And some people can be great developers and be passionate about another hobby and want to do that and not want to drain their focused work time on their side project. So I would say that's a really good point, is that I hate that expectation that it feels for me is maybe dying down a little bit, but that you must have this
you must program all day and all night, like.
Yeah.
And I think that's going down in the, there's increasingly awareness that we don't all need to be people who just wanna do this for fun too.
Right, yeah.
I feel like it definitely takes certain mindset and skills and approach to solving problems to really get into programming. And if you are that person, there's nothing like it and it's amazing. But there's a tendency in some businesses to say, well, let's look at the kind of superficial details of that. And to do bad pattern matching, basically. Where the person that fits into our culture, fits into our team, whatever, is not necessarily the person who approaches problems with that mindset of I really want to tease this apart and figure out a great solution. It's the person who shares the same hobbies as me and the same, hours as me and whatever. And I think that's where you get into that expectation of, well, I, built this company at 3:00 in the morning at my dining room table, so obviously I'm looking for people who want to be programming at 3:00 in the morning. I like getting some sleep, and I like hobbies that will actually get me away from being on a computer, which cuts into my time that I could spend writing talks or doing open source or whatever pretty significantly.
Yeah.
So I hope there's increasingly some awareness that, what the real pattern match and not the bad pattern match is there.
And it seems like as the industry gets bigger, it just has to happen because you're running out of people who love to do it for a hobby will probably.
They already have jobs.
Exactly, and so then as this becomes more of like a, people learning it as a trade and it just feels like it can't last. You're gonna run out of people.
Oh, and I wanna sort of lean on, it's not just like, the people who learn it as a trade are somehow a second choice. I think actually the people who learn it as a trade are in a lot of ways a better choice. Because that's when you break out of we just wanna hire the people who act exactly the way we do and say, hey, maybe the people who aren't doing open source all night or spending all of their weekends at conferences or whatever, that's also bringing in more diversity of opinion and experiences and ways, different perspectives, ways of approaching things, as well as people with very different life circumstances. Because goodness knows we can't have a tech industry that's made up of, if y'all will excuse me, like young, mostly guys, mostly, single, mostly just out of college who don't really have other lives and responsibilities and so on, so.
So I think ultimately you have to remember that your primary tool as a developer is your brain, and brains don't work if you don't get proper rest and you don't take good breaks, get proper sleep, things like this. So there's a point where mostly when you're young, you can maybe keep that pace up, but as you get older or just kind of more used to it, that type of pace burns you out really quickly. Your enthusiasm for those side projects wanes because you're just tired and you start to associate them with being tired. But on the other side of things, I did drink a little bit of the Kool-Aid and I did get into conferences because I found that they energized me. I really learn a lot at conferences and I enjoy going to them. And I had an employer who wasn't always supportive of paying for me to go to them. So in order to pay for it, I do speak at conferences. And that has been really helpful and rewarding because I can find the thing that was really hard for me and try to share that back to someone else. And I get a lot of good feedback and things from that. And it just kind of, it helps me sometimes with the confidence and things like that. So, I do end up spending a lot of my extra time doing programming projects and writing talks and stuff. But I'm I'm mindful of the demand that can have, and I'm throttling it quite a bit, to make sure that I'm not traveling so much, because that makes you tired, crossing time zones and stuff like that. And, the pace at an actual conference can be kind of intense, you get a lot less sleep and stuff. So it's just kind of, figuring out those things about tech that you enjoy, that kind of re-energize you. Those aren't going to drain you as much as the things you enjoy least, which probably is pretty obvious, but burnout happens when you're doing more of those things you dislike. They drain your cup of energy, of passion, and the things that you do enjoy can help fill it up and restore it. So it's finding that balance between the things that make you excited, those are over here, the things that make you excited and the things that make you feel really drained, and finding that balance. But I feel like it should still be driven by you and not your employer, because that is your free time. And you should definitely guard your free time as much as you can, because they'll take it if they can get it.
And just like one more thing on that, we didn't say this explicitly, we said like employers who are looking for you to have side projects, but also like this trend, and luckily I'm not in an employer like this, working for an employer like this, but employers who want you to work all day and night for them, like have insane hours, or like expect that the projects, if they give you a project, you finish it by, whenever it's done, however long that needs to take, is something that I'm just thinking through things that I'm like extra worried for if I ever am looking at job descriptions or interviewing, is just like, that's a big one. If it seems like the work-life balance is off, then a solid no with that. So it feels like a trend that's kind of, it's on a good trend, but I don't know.
It's a lot more obvious when you're shopping around for a job, I guess. That's where you start to see the signs of what they're expecting, what are people looking for in the hiring process, what are their expectations. But you can push back on those things. And
If they say they feed you dinner for free, then that's a red flag.
It sounds like a great work. Think about what it means if you're there for 3 meals a day.
If they feed you lunch, I'm like, but if they feed you dinner,
Do we have laundry on site? And like,
No.
no. Get out.
the bedroom's there.
What advice would you give me, because I want to learn the language and so forth, and how would I get started? What would I need to do?
I think events like this, you're already on the right track, this is great. But there are a lot of, I know Momentum does some, and there are lots of other courses and programs in the area that are kind of just, one day intro classes. Like I help organize a thing called Rails Bridge, where we do, it's a weekend-long intro to Rails. It's just like one day, we help you get it set up on your computer. You build like a basic app, and then from there you cut off. So I think starting with something like that is really helpful. It's hard to start on your own, especially just because like getting set up and knowing where to start can be such a burden. Like for me, when I tried to do it on my own, I was like, well, if I can't even get this installed on my computer, then clearly I can't be a programmer. Like I'm not. Turns out installing things is the hardest part. but it's really easy to like give yourself that negative talk. Like I can't even like get this first thing up and running. So I feel like getting a support network as quickly as possible by going to events like this is like the best thing that you can do to try to get off the ground and just, know you're not alone and have people to ask questions when you get stuck. So.
do you have a problem that you're trying to solve with technology, a specific problem? Or are you just in general wanting to learn more?
I'm looking at it as a change of career. I am a hazardous waste and material coordinator. And jobs do not respect anybody in safety or hazardous waste. And I just decided, hey, it's time to make a change. I've done contracting research for so long, and when you contract with the government, They throw you a pile of junk and say, this is what I want, put it together and let's go. There are times that I've said days and night trying to figure out how I'm gonna get a computer to talk to a device to just fill ampules while you're not there. Or you gotta set up a camera for someone that's gonna be at home or out weekend so they can look at some animals to see what they're doing and so forth. That's about what I've started out with. And I said, well, yeah, excuse my language, if I can do that, I probably need to take it to the next level.
Yeah. Finding that next thing you want to learn and being really purposeful about it can really help, because otherwise, like just looking at all the things you can do with technology can be really overwhelming. So if that's an area that you're enjoying, you might look at something in the IoT space that looks interesting, looks like a fun project, and you'll probably see some meetup groups that are having workshops in that area. So if it looks interesting, you can read through the description, and they'll usually try to tell you what prerequisites you might need to know, and try to, not like to lowball it or anything, but just kind of be honest and know if you can meet those prerequisites and give it a try. Accept it if it doesn't work out during the meetup timeframe, and just keep at it, because hopefully they'll give you a bunch of resources that you can continue to tinker with it when you go home. So.
I think you're in a great area for being curious and wanting to change careers and like learn more about coding. Momentum, obviously all the meetups here. Girl Develop It is an organization that I'm passionate about and work for. Even though it sounds like it's for girls, it's for everybody. But we have affordable classes that are maybe like they go across like 4 weeks and are like 4 days long, like twice a week, and are like $96 and to like have kind of an intro level course about programming. There are obviously a ton of great like online resources. What are some free ones?
Free Code Camp is the one I always push people to.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Free Code Camp.
FreeCodeCamp.com. And they have an excellent blog as well that is always full of great articles to help you keep going
And
forward.
very much aimed at people who are sort of just getting into things. There's no assumption of you have to be this level that we got before you can even read our stuff. So if you're interested in sort of stuff that's for the public good, it's Code for Durham, Code for Chapel Hill, Code for Cary, Code for Raleigh, and they all have regular meetups and are, have people with a very wide variety of technical skill levels, and they focus on projects that are being built as volunteers. It is definitely coding your free time stuff. But a lot of it is, city housing data, or bus schedules, or app to get your trash picked up, or stuff that is built to serve the community. So
If you want to do government work in your free time.
if you want to do government work as a volunteer, but that can be a way to kind of get into things at whatever skill level you're at, if that's something that interests you.
I found through events like that and also through meetup groups, it's a good way to find a mentor, someone who's been in the industry for a while who doesn't mind, I don't even say doesn't mind, is excited to work with you and help you learn. That's always been a huge thing for me, to be able to find people who will sort of help me figure out what the next thing is.
Well, you just said that it's better to work with other developers because you'll grow a lot more, right? So if you're working in one of those, agile, setting where you're the only tech person on the whole pod, right? So you gotta have to, I guess, translate what they want into tech speak and speak it back. How do you deal with those every days of, translating on what's the level of effort, what you have to do to get things done, how long things take, how it works, as opposed to when you're just sitting next to a developer, it's like, look at line 322, what the hell's going on here, you know? That's a lot easier than telling your project manager, this might take 8 hours.
Yeah.
And then she doesn't understand that because the customer wants it now.
Yeah, the tool that I like the best for talking to non-technical people is user story mapping, and it's agile-ish. I feel like you can apply it in an agile environment or not be in the agile environment. It uses user stories as the basic idea of the things that need to happen, but he talks a lot about how to prioritize, and it sounds like you've got a project manager who is
So,
like, that's awesome. So, you know, they're doing a fair amount of prioritizing, but there is the realm of what is actually possible, and they can't just make up how much time that task is going to take. So, he talks about, looking at what needs to happen first and next, and chunking the work into reasonable bites. But I like that for talking to non-technical people about, there are a lot of really good labels for the types of priorities you might have, like what is going to bring in money for the company versus what is going to save you money because it's using fewer resources. It compares the things that will set your company or your product apart from the competition. There's a label for that type of feature. And so when you're looking at the features and you can talk to people about those specific labels, you can get them to rank things a little bit differently than they would if they were going through in steps and stages. And then you're implementing the things that need to happen for them first. And so you should be able to say, well, this I can do during this sprint. This chunk of work I can do during this sprint. Or maybe I could do this part here and get started on this for the next sprint. Something like that. But I really like those labels for talking to people, getting them to define what it is they need first.
And hopefully you're working with, you know, product or project managers who kind of trust you as a developer and as a development team. You know, I'm lucky to be in a good, like, working relationship where I could be like, okay, that exact thing you asked for would take 3 days, but here's a slight variation that looks visually similar that would take me half a day. And usually my experience has been, my product team has been like, yes, let's do that, yeah.
But I mean, that kind of approach can also help with just clarifying the needs. Even if you are doing the 3-day thing, understanding this piece of it is the sort of really cool piece of it. This other piece of it is, you know, probably a little bit less used, might have a little bit more flex in it and so on. It's really hard when you have a team or a structure, whatever, that tries to just sort of dictate, okay, this is exactly the thing we need and how much time you have to do it. And anytime that can be a conversation rather than an order, it becomes a lot more.
Are there any things that you know now that you wish you knew earlier in your transition into development?
That there are no stupid questions.
Yeah.
There might be people who make you feel stupid for asking questions.
That's on them.
But that's not them.
But like being able to stop and put a hand up and say, how does this thing over here work? And not assume I have to already know this, or I'm going to look bad, or I'm going to be punished. It's way worse to not ask that question than to just say, yo, I'm confused by this thing that it's doing over here.
Or like, you used a word I'm not familiar with.
Right.
What is that? Yeah. I would say like that, not that you don't have to work with jerks, because sometimes you do, but sometimes you might work with a jerk who doesn't know anything, or sometimes you might work with a jerk who knows a lot. And so just, you know, try to learn as much as you can and try to get out of that situation as soon as possible.
And try and separate the stuff you can learn from the human interaction, which might not be learned.
Right.
For me, it's definitely the being willing to to ask stupid questions in the beginning, because there are none. But now, that I've been further in my career, I see so many things that I should have asked that 3 years ago, but I've just been pretending that I knew it the whole time, and now it's awkward to ask now.
I don't really like to admit how long it took me to figure out the stupid question things. I worked for a really long time in situations where I was the only developer, so I literally did have to know the things. Or at least look them up or do without them. And one of, I had been doing this stuff for a number of years before I worked on really good teams that actually were able to work together. And I had to learn, oh, I came in and I'm supposed to be sort of experienced at this stuff, and that was another level on top of I'm vaguely embarrassed that I don't know this thing and I'm afraid I'm gonna say something stupid, and all of those just human embarrassment issues, right? But it really works, and people are always totally fine with somebody saying, hey, I'm having trouble solving this.
There's so much to know, it feels unlikely that everybody knows the same things. Everybody probably has different holes in their knowledge, but you can still function really productively in an arena and not know a lot of things, not know deeply how something works, and you kind of gain that as you go forward, and that's really enriching too. It's being oh, that's how that works. I use this every day, but maybe didn't know exactly what
it's
on.
doing underneath.
Right.
How you can use it some other way.
Well, I had one fun question for y'all. What's your favorite depiction of programming in TV or movies? I know, they're all bad, but absolutely.
In NCIS, when two people are typing on the same keyboard.
How do you even do that?
That's good programming.
They're hacking extra because two people have their hands on the same keyboard, and so.
I definitely said favorite, not most accurate.
But they're in a hoodie in a dark corner in the dark, and the hacker, and I'm you can have the lights on, you can be in your pajamas, so you know.
Yeah, no, but you have to be doing it on a black screen with green letters that are being reflected in your subtitles.
Yeah, I worked on so many teams where everyone worked in the dark, and it's what are you doing? I can't see in here. Yeah, this has been, and thank you all. This has been super informative for me as well as I think for everyone else. I'm sure we're all going to mingle a little bit, but yeah, let's stop and thank you all. I really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.